Stolen valor is a federal crime. This is something that came up this week in relationship to Governor Tim Walz's military career. He's the current candidate for vice president on the Kamala Harris ticket. Now, stolen valor is when somebody embellishes or makes fraudulent claims about a military career, and it is punishable by prison time, and it's a very serious charge in the military. So Sergeant Dan McKnight is going to join us to discuss this today. He is a veteran of the U.S. Marine Corps Reserves, U.S. Army, and the Idaho Army National Guard. He's also the founder of Bring Our Troops Home. So thank you for joining me about this, because I feel like it's very sensitive. I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings as we try to understand what this is.
Absolutely. No, thanks for having me on. I agree. This is something that's very serious in the veteran and the military communities. And when we see something that's taken a little bit of advantage of regarding stolen valor, I think it's always important to get to the bottom of the issue, because I never want to impugn somebody's actual service to the country.
Right. That's what I'm nervous about. So I see a lot of people saying he made it unclear that he was not a part of Operation Enduring Freedom, which was in Afghanistan, because he plays fast and loose with his bio, saying he supported Operation Enduring Freedom. And so is this something that people just do because he was serving in Italy? And if we say, wait a minute, you weren't a support role there, are we then impugning people who were holding down the fort in Italy? Can you explain that?
Sure. There's actually two distinct issues of stolen valor that come to mind when we talk about Tim Walz. And the first one is the claim that he is a combat veteran. He uses ambiguous and assumptive language to try and associate his actual service in Italy and with his record of something more significant. It's unnecessary and it's gratuitous. But when he speaks about gun control, he says this phrase over and over again, that we should be able to limit the weapons of war to those that carry them in war, like I did, something along those lines, where he implies that he carried a weapon in war in a combat zone. He's intentionally
Yes, we have a
misleading.
clip of that. Why don't we pause and play it?
Hope woke up like many of you did 5 weeks ago and said, Dad, you're the only person I know who's in elected office. You need to stop what's happening with this. I'll take my kick in the butt for the NRA. I spent 25 years in the Army and I hunt. And I gave the money back, and I'll tell you what I have been doing. I've been voting for common sense legislation that protects the Second Amendment, but we can do background checks. We can do CDC research. We can make sure we don't have reciprocal carry among states, and we can make sure that those weapons of war that I carried in war is the only place where those weapons are at.
So yes, here he says, like the weapons I carried in war, but his biography does not support that. So please go ahead.
Sure. He's intentionally misleading, and he's kind of inflating an already somewhat admirable 2-decade-long military career. Like I said, it's unnecessary, it's gratuitous. But the second issue of stolen valor is his claim that he was a retired command sergeant major. And I think this one's a little bit more important. And it's also incredibly false. But why is it so important? Well, Walz was conditionally promoted to E9 or sergeant major, and then he was slated into a battalion leadership position as a command sergeant major. Both ranks are the same pay grade, but the command sergeant major carries a serious gravitas as the senior enlisted advisor to a battalion commanding officer or higher. CSMs are expected to be above reproach. They're capable of delivering the truth to a commanding officer without undue color or filter. And they're notorious for their plain speak, right? As part of Walz's conditional promotion, he was required to complete the Sergeant Major's Academy and then serve 2 more years, or otherwise his promotion was going to be retracted. Well, when his battalion received their deployment orders to go overseas and serve in a combat tour in Iraq, he decided, instead of fulfilling his obligations as the command sergeant major, that he would resign and stay home for personal gain. He abandoned his men and his post, and he chose to retire before his contract was over. So when we choose to turn his back on his men, his conditional promotion was revoked, and he was demoted back to E8, which is master sergeant. And that's the truth of what the stolen valor is about. He did not retire as a command sergeant major. His DD 214, or the National Guard's equivalent of it, is called the NGB Form 22 for anybody that really wants to get into the weeds. It lists his rank at retirement as master sergeant. So there's 2 distinct stolen valor issues, but now we have to look at it and decide, does it actually matter, and is it actually a violation of the Stolen Valor Act of 2013? And you mentioned it, I'm glad you brought it up, because the law actually states that fraudulently claiming to have received a Valor award with the intention of obtaining money, property, or other tangible benefits by convincing another that he received such an award, that is the violation of the law. I think that running for a lucrative elected position certainly meets the other tangible benefits requirement, but does lying about carrying a weapon or lying about your rank at retirement meet the threshold for fraudulently claiming to have received a Valor award? I don't know that it does, but I think what he actually did is much worse than stolen valor. And I think that the stolen valor thing is actually a distraction from what I see as maybe the most offensive thing about Tim Walz. And it's the fact that he abandoned his men. He abandoned them when they were about to go to war for the purpose of personal gain. That's the part that I find most offensive, because now he's willing to send other men, other sons and daughters off to fight in a war that he politely excused himself from. He's willing to let them go. He's willing to go to Congress and vote to fund these illegal and unconstitutional wars and send somebody else in his place. That to me is offensive.
Okay. And so that's why we have these videos that are going viral of his cohorts who did go to that war, and they felt personally abandoned by that. Now, something about that, I'm kind of trying to see how the media is covering this, and they do seem to be making excuses for him. I sent you this yesterday, this NPR article that said, well, he actually really did have a lot of personal conflict about whether or not he should go to war or run for office, because he didn't know what was the best thing to do. And sometimes that happens. When the reporter asks another reporter about stolen valor, is it even important? They say, well, this is just fodder that old vets on the internet get online and try to call each other bad words. So let's listen to this and let me know if that is offensive or if this is just making excuses for somebody.
I mean, vets are just like other people. Some are Republicans, some are Democrats, and there are a very special few who get on social media and they call each other very bad words we can't say on the radio. Just last week, there were people hitting Vance for his military record, which did not include combat. From the other side today, there are many, many who are attacking Walz. Others have been pointing out the fact that former President Trump avoided service in Vietnam. But most, I think, would simply respect anyone who served for any amount of time, as long as they don't go bragging about things they didn't do. And Walz maybe came close to that with his word choice, but it's not like he's been misrepresenting his record or wearing medals he didn't earn, which we have seen among some members of Congress. I mean, Vance can legitimately say he went to Iraq and was disillusioned by what he saw there. Walz was critical of Iraq, the Iraq War, as a congressman, and he was a leading member on the very bipartisan Veterans Affairs Committee while in Congress. Many vets I spoke to just wish that the politics wouldn't sink to politicizing military service.
But here we are. That is NPR's Quill Lawrence. Thank you so much, Quill.
Thanks.
Do you want to respond to that?
Sure, absolutely. Stolen valor is important to the military and the veteran community. But like I said, I think it's a distraction at this point. And there are times when veterans will get online and we will, as the reporter from NPR said, say mean things to each other. And that's the nature of the military. When you go to war with a brother or sister and you're put in these terrible situations, you find common ground over maybe some of the most offensive things that you can imagine. We're expected to face down death and war and all the things that we would never want to do as civilized human beings. And we have to find common humor. And so we do have a tendency to call each other, as the reporter once again said, mean names. But that's not the point. This stolen valor thing is not about who gets in line first on Veterans Day to get the free fajitas at Applebee's. That's not what this is about. It's about belonging to an organization. And when you put that title, that command sergeant major, or that award of valor on your chest or on your resume, even worse, and it's not true, it displays a certain lack of character and moral fiber. And the Vice President of the United States, like a command sergeant major, should be above reproach. And when you have these type of questions about your character, I find it unacceptable to be able to serve in that position based on that issue alone. He is not above reproach.
Okay. So then if, let's say we're some of his cohorts who served in Italy supporting, I don't know if that's offensive that I just did air quotes, supporting enduring freedom, would they maybe do anything similar? Would it be, how are those who are serving outside of war zones? Do they see them, would they do this, I guess, is what I'm asking.
I think veterans that served, that have faced that situation we are very careful the words we choose because they actually mean something. I myself was not a door kicker. I wasn't one of the frontline infantry special forces troops that was raiding villages and going through, the hand-to-hand, door-to-door combat. I would never consider myself one, and nor would I present myself as such. At the same time, if I was in Italy in support of Operation Enduring Freedom or Iraqi Freedom or Spartan Shield or any of the other names that they've given these wars, I would absolutely claim that I was part of Operation Enduring Freedom if I had been awarded that ribbon or that medal. And there are very specific criteria to be able to receive one of those combat designations. So not everybody that serves in Operation Enduring Freedom or Iraqi Freedom were in country. Some are in Kuwait, right? So what's the distance? What's the geographical restriction? I think it's easy just to look at your DD-214, which is your title, your document when you get out of the military that lists all of your deployments, your awards, your billeting, your posting, your MOSs. And if it specifically says that you are a veteran of the global war on terror serving in Operation Iraqi Freedom or Enduring Freedom, I think you have a legitimate claim to say that you were. I would never want to discredit somebody's service because of where they served during a time of war.
Okay, fair enough. So then if this is something that is prosecuted, then he should be able to show this document saying that he was deployed for this mission, even if he was not in the Middle East in any way. So how often is something like this actually prosecuted, and do people defend themselves and win?
I think it's not prosecuted often, but it's generally only when it's in regards to awards of valor, the Purple Heart, the Medal of Honor, the Navy Cross, things like that. It's not typically about time in service, combat deployment status, or things like that, or even rank upon leaving. It's usually the awards of valor because the law is very clear about that. But we still should prosecute. We should prosecute him based on what he's done since that time. Let's prosecute him on he served as the ranking member of the Armed Forces Committee in the House for 12 years, and he voted against the most substantial veterans bill that Congress has passed in decades. It's called the Mission Act, that gives veterans that went to the war, that actually served in the war, and they were injured, it gives them the right to get medical care in the community instead of just the VA. He voted against it. He voted against it because he didn't want somebody from the other side to have a win. And that shows a severe lack of courage and character. He was outspoken against Iraq war, which I think is the right position. But then he went to Congress and he voted to fund that war 12 years in a row and never took a substantial position against it. His character is flawed, and it's not because he overinflated his resume. It's because he is a flawed human being, and he is not beyond reproach. And the Supreme Court has said he has the right to say and do the things that he has done on his resume. The Supreme Court's given him that right, and I think he is exercising that right to the highest order, and he's proving what an incredible jerk he is for overinflating his military status.
Okay, so last question, because you brought up partisan politics. I had to wonder, as this news breaks, didn't they vet him for this? Didn't they realize this might be a problem? And in talking to my husband Clayton about this, he said they don't care because they don't think that they'll get military votes anyway. The Democrats that was his take on it. Can you respond to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think they're going to get many military votes. That's probably true. But more importantly, I don't think they care anyway. His demographics and his status, his social status, his race, his religion, how he votes on bills, those are more important to them than anything. Will he do what he is told? And he has proven that he is willing to get in line and be a yes man for whoever is pulling his chain. So he is the epitome of doublespeak, slick politicians who are verbal skeptics, maybe of open-ended and undeclared wars, but then do nothing really to change that. They're good boys and girls, and they refuse to use Congress's heaviest hammer to actually do something about the things that they claim publicly to be against. They'll never take the money away from something like a war that they're against because they are absolute yes men. And so he comes to Minnesota, and it's very important to understand Minnesota is the heart of this fight to keep the National Guard from going off and fighting in these wars. Their former governor, Governor Perpich, sued the Department of Defense and said, we're not sending the National Guard to fight in a war that you haven't declared. And the Supreme Court came back and said, we understand that. You can't stop the president from sending your National Guard troops outside of the country to train, but they refused to opine about war specifically. And Minnesota is the heart of this fight, and he is just not living up to what the folks in Minnesota would actually expect from their elected leaders.
Okay, but to the Democrats, he's the company guy. He'll do what he's told unless it involves going into combat, I guess.
Absolutely. They are no longer the party of anti-war. They are the war hawks or the chicken hawks, really, at this point in time, who would send their sons and daughters to fight off in any war, any place. Ukraine, yes. Israel, yes. Gaza, yes. China, yes. They're willing to fight anywhere right now to keep that industrial complex fed.
Yes, that's my take on it too. Thank you so much for your expertise on this. I really appreciate you breaking it down. Follow Sergeant Dan McKnight and also his organization, Bring Our Troops Home, because he is a great spokesman for peace and freedom. Thank you again for your time.
You bet. Thanks for having me on.